In 1970, a monstrous cyclone devastated what was then East Pakistan. 500,000 perished. Millions were destitute. Within months, a savage civil war erupted as the region fought for independence. In 1971, the nation of Bangladesh was born, but it was in shambles.
I went into an area which was extremely devastated. There was a lot of houses destroyed, livestock was decimated, the farmers didn't have any plows, and that suddenly brought to me the extreme vulnerability of people in situations like this. And that's how BRAC was born.
Abed was an executive with Shell Oil, but he quit his job and recruited 24 young volunteers. They built houses and rehabilitated farmland. They established health clinics. In time, BRAC's mission shifted from disaster relief to long-term development. Then, Abed decided that BRAC should think big.
In 1979, it was the International Year of the Child, and we thought, what could we do to bring down child mortality in our country?
Nothing claimed more young lives than diarrhea, caused by waterborne diseases like cholera. Diarrhea kills through dehydration. The standard treatment with intravenous fluids was no option in communities with no health facilities. Ironically, researchers in Bangladesh had recently shown that dehydration could also be treated orally, with water mixed with salt and sugar. The added ingredients allow the body to absorb and replace lost fluids. Oral rehydration therapy was a monumental breakthrough. Mothers could now save their children with simple household supplies. They just didn't know it yet.
That discovery was there, but it was not disseminated. Most people didn't know how to prepare oral rehydration solution and how to administer it. So we decided basically to go from house to house and teach one woman in every household how to make oral rehydration fluid at home.
BRAC trained an army of instructors. Teaching the formula took minutes. Half a liter of water, 1 pinch of salt, and a fistful of sugar. Teaching 13 million women took about 10 years. But child mortality rates were cut in half. The success of the campaign gave BRAC the confidence to scale up all its projects.
I mean, once your organization has been to every household in rural Bangladesh, then of course the entire country becomes your backyard, and you could really think in terms of expanding all other kinds of programs throughout the nation.
Look, the children are pooping in the water and the people are using it. Is that acceptable?
Today, BRAC has become one of the largest non-governmental organizations in the world. It employs over 90,000 people and runs programs that reach over 100 million. In the last 3 decades, its health volunteers have helped cut the nation's birth rate in half and improved lives throughout Bangladesh.
One of the great challenges in public health is taking a program that you've shown to succeed in a community and scaling it up to a whole country. BRAC shows how it's possible. They franchise, they replicate, they use in effect the same model that McDonald's used on hamburgers. Instead, they're saving people's lives.
BRAC is largely self-funded, with profits from its commercial arm. It channels the handiwork of rural artisans into its department stores. It runs food processing plants and banks. But its focus never wavers from the place where it began. Here in the villages, BRAC is transforming lives.
Welcome everyone to our public event featuring BRAC Bank. That was a bit of an abrupt stop there, but it gives you a real taste of the degree to which BRAC and BRAC Bank have been deeply, deeply involved in the development of Bangladesh and as a part of its history. I'd like to now welcome Laurie Spengler to the stage. Hi, Laurie, how are you?
Hi, Tom, I'm very well.
Great. When we started developing this program and we came to this place where we said we really needed to develop a deeper understanding of BRAC and BRAC Bank, I couldn't think of anybody better to host this conversation than Laurie. So I'm going to hand over the hosting duties. Let me tell you a little bit about Laurie Spengler for those of you who are new to the GABV family. Laurie is very much a part of the history of the GABV. We wouldn't have 6 principles of values-based banking with Laurie because she was developing investment propositions for the GABV, and this was a back and forth process to really create and engage all of our CEOs in that process. She's a close relation with the GABV family. She's also an investment banker. She's been one of the people in the Shore Bank founding team. Shore Bank, one of our founding members of the GABV. She's, of course, been a member of the Triodos family with Include. And she's now running her own show, something called Courageous Capital Advisors, where she gets to bring some of her wisdom and knowledge to continue develop investment propositions and at the same time to help organizations like BRAC to develop. She's now a board member on one of the subsidiary boards of BRAC, and she can tell you more about that. So, Laurie, I hope I can do justice to everything that you're doing now, but it's great that I can invite you to host this panel and share with us the past, the present, and the future. BRAC Bank is one of the most remarkable stories in the banking world that I think you and I have lived with for many years.
Great. Tom, thanks so much. And it's an absolute pleasure to be back with the GABV at the annual meeting and to welcome our global audience to today's session, which is focused on BRAC. So thank you for that. And we are delighted that so many people have joined us from across time zones, across geographies. I think it's one of the benefits of our virtual connections, although we do appreciate that for some it's late in the evening and for others it's early in the morning. So thank you for taking the time to join us. And we have a terrific session lined up, and we really look forward to getting into some specific and actionable insights about what really is an amazing organization of BRAC. As Tom shared, I've had the personal privilege of working with BRAC since 2005, and I'm currently a senior advisor to BRAC International, focused on the microfinance activities outside of Bangladesh, as well as an advisor to BRAC University. For those of you who are not as familiar with BRAC, I really encourage you to get to know the organization, perhaps after this session. There have been numerous publications and articles and writings about BRAC. The video that you just saw captured a few highlights. In 2020, Harvard Business School published a case study on BRAC. Ian Smiley has written a book on BRAC. And as I said, there are numerous publications. But to contextualize some of the information you'll be hearing during today's session, I just want to share a few highlights. So we know from the video, BRAC was established in 1972, really as a mission-driven organization focused initially on the immediate humanitarian needs of Bangladesh, but they quickly transitioned to a commitment that focused on the alleviation of poverty, both in Bangladesh, but extended internationally. Importantly, with BRAC, it wasn't really satisfied with looking at the symptoms of poverty. They really wanted early in their evolution to push and identify the root causes of poverty and then try to address those. And that focus on the root causes really led BRAC to think about we need multiple solutions, multiple tools in the toolkit, and multiple entities to have a combination of interventions to get at those root causes: healthcare, education, access to finance, access to markets. And today, the BRAC family consists of what I would like to say maybe a constellation of operating entities. We have BRAC, BRAC International, BRAC Bank, BCash, BRAC University, and many more. And these are entities that are providing direct services and products to meet the real needs of people in community, whether those needs are educational or health related, legal, finance, educational at the senior level with a university. BRAC also has a constellation of investments in information technology, real estate, insurance, and the operations and reach of BRAC really have global influence. The size and scale, it's just quite impressive. And every time I interact with BRAC, something new has been rolled out. And the founder of BRAC, Sir Fazli Hassan Abed, used to talk about the resistance of being characterized as BRAC's activities as small and beautiful. There was always a very high touch dimension to BRAC's model, but he instilled from the very beginning a sense of size, scale, and powerful relevance in terms of the solutions that meet the needs of people. BRAC is now present in 11 countries around the world, so well beyond Bangladesh, operating in Asia and in Africa. There are representative entities in the United States and the United Kingdom. There are microfinance entities specifically in 6 countries outside of Bangladesh, serving more than 7 million clients in total, more than 90% of whom are women. The operating budget of BRAC and BRAC International in 2020 was $1.27 billion, just to give you a sense of order of magnitude. The bank's balance sheet, as you've heard from Salim, is more than $5 billion in assets. bCash has a staggering volume of daily transaction activity in Bangladesh and has been voted 2 years in a row the best brand in Bangladesh of all businesses. And the university now has 14,000 students in their alumni network across the globe. So the size, scale, and reach is quite amazing. But I think what's most compelling about BRAC, and it was mentioned in the video, is that over these many decades of activities across multiple entities and solutions, the vision has remained consistent, working to build a world free of exploitation and discrimination with opportunities for all. Women have always been central in that vision because the conviction is that by empowering women, it leads to massive improvements in the quality of life for everyone. What has always impressed me about conversations about BRAC, and I think we're going to hear this in our conversation today, is that the conversation is not about BRAC itself. The focus is on the communities, the individuals, and the households that BRAC serves, because it's these individuals, households, and individuals that are both the source of the sustained motivation for everyone within the BRAC family, but it's also the collective purpose of the organizations that comprise the BRAC family. So what do we hope to achieve in this conversation today? We hope to highlight elements of the BRAC story that may be particularly relevant to the challenges of today that confront people and planet. And we also hope to identify aspects of the BRAC model that may encourage other organizations to move beyond their comfort zone and contribute to solutions to people and planet. And to do this, we're going to be joined by 3 extraordinary individuals within the BRAC family: Shamran Abed, Executive Director of BRAC International; Salim Hussain, CEO of BRAC Bank; and Mary Houghton, founder of ShoreBank, or one of the 4 founders of ShoreBank, and a friend and ally of BRAC over many decades. You have their bios online, but they are 3 very special individuals who are going to be sharing their perspectives and their experiences with BRAC in our conversation. The founder of BRAC, Sir Fazli Hassan Abed, regularly reminded me that BRAC is not a bank, it's not a microfinance organization, it's not a university, it's not a humanitarian organization, it's not a social enterprise, it's a learning organization. And we look forward to learning from Salim, Shamran, and Mary in our conversation today. So let's get started. So thank you all of you for joining us today. And Shamran, I'm going to kick off with you. I'm going to ask each of you the same initial question before we dig into more specific questions. And the opening question is really a combination of a look back and a look ahead. So we know we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of BRAC this year, actually this month, in fact, and BRAC has been cited as the best development model in the world. And as you look back, Shamran, from your vantage point, what stands out as some of the most relevant contributions that BRAC has made to Bangladesh and beyond? And then the 2-part is, as you look ahead, why do you think BRAC's model and approach is so relevant for the issues that confront us today? So I'll invite you, Shamran, to begin.
Thanks a lot, Laurie, and I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you just fine.
Great. It's great to be at the annual meeting of the GABV, and obviously one that's being hosted by BRAC Bank. Yeah, I was able to listen in on some of the other sessions, which have been going great. So greetings to all GABV colleagues. So I'll start by saying, obviously, as you've heard from Laurie, BRAC now works around the world. We work in Asia and Africa, but really just to say that BRAC's story is inextricably linked to Bangladesh's story. So if I look back now for the last 50 years, you know, it's, and you saw a little bit of this from the video that we watched just a little while ago. You know, at the time of liberation in late 1971 and into early 1972, this country was literally in a state of ruin. You know, it was devastated by the cyclone. It was devastated by war. It was already one of the poorest countries in the world before that. And, you know, if you see if I just, you know, tell you a little bit about the situation at that time, 10 million refugees returning from India to find their homes destroyed, the crops where there were no crops that had been planted. You know, maternal mortality, child mortality were among the highest in the world. Educational attainment, I mean, it was very low levels of literacy for boys and girls. We had one of the highest fertility rates in the world, 7. So 7 children to every woman. So the population density is the highest in the world, as you know, in Bangladesh now, and has been for many years. So, you know, it was, you know, I mean, just a sorry state of affairs. And, you know, at that time, starting off as a development organization, I mean, you could work across any of these things, from health to education to rights, gender, financial services, basic humanitarian support. And BRAC sort of did that in the early days, started with basic humanitarian support, but as you saw, sort of very quickly realized that the needs were far greater than just providing basic humanitarian support to the returning refugees. And very quickly decided to work more holistically and really try to solve problems at scale. And obviously, you know, talking about a 50-year history in a couple of minutes is not easy, but I'll just say a few things. You know, what I think has set BRAC apart is this real sort of this real stress on trying to understand the problem from all the different angles, and trying to apply a holistic sort of solution to that, and then scaling that as much as possible. And in Bangladesh's case, with most of the programs that we've run, we've managed to do them nationally. So if you look at the health programs, the education program, microfinance, you know, the programs in community empowerment, human rights and legal services, agriculture, food security, water, sanitation and hygiene, you know, climate, you know, we've been able to really go nationwide and go into every village, in every community, work with all kinds of people and really grow and show that if you do it in a way, and, you know, a lot of external, you know, publications, including The Economist has called BRAC one of the most business-like NGOs. So that's the other thing I wanted to mention, that if you do it in a way where you're trying to be very effective, very efficient, and very practical, you can scale things nationally and show great results. And BRAC has been able to do that for 5 decades, which is why it has been able to raise money for the programs that it has run. It has also invested in its own social enterprises. So BRAC has felt from the very early days that we don't want to just be running programs that are funded by donors, but we should also be doing social enterprises which themselves are impactful and can add great value to society, but also earn and generate profits that you can use to fund your other programs. BRAC has invested as the social enterprise, and then BRAC has made investments in institutions outside of BRAC, setting up a bank, setting up several other institutions in the financial sector, in other sectors as well. We've built a university so that we train and build the next generation of leaders in this country. So really looking at a country's problems and saying, what can we do as a civil society organizations to have an impact across all of the different dimensions of that, and really doing it at scale, to solve problems at scale and doing it holistically. The other quick thing I'll say is, one of the things BRAC realized very early on, you know, through its work in the early 70s is, you know, if you want to do development, you've got to invest in women and girls. And that has been another very core part of our work. The founder used to say, I've gone into these, in the early days, I'd go into these villages, I'd go into these homes, I'd go into these communities, and I found that it was the women that were managing poverty, right? The women were the ones that were trying to save from whatever meager income there was in the household. It was the women that were investing in their children's future. The men were sometimes the ones that were earning, but then, spending a lot of that money and not really saving for the future and not really investing in the family or the children. It was the women that were saving for a rainy day, investing in their families, investing in their children, trying to send the kids to school. And he used to say, if the women are the managers of poverty, then we want to make sure that they are also the managers of their development. And so how do we make them central to the development of their families and their communities and their country is something BRAC has believed in very strongly from very early on. And that's why, gender, equality, empowerment of women, to all the work that we do, whether it's microfinance, health, education, rights, is very central to who we are as an organization and what we believe in. And that's what we're trying to do across the world now in Africa and Asia, outside Bangladesh as well. So those are the few things I'd say. A culture of problem solving, scaling everything by being very effective and efficient, almost business-like, approaching poverty from multiple angles, not just having a niche that you work on, but looking at all the different things that keep poor people entrenched in poverty. Being willing to scale to to levels where usually NGOs are sometimes uncomfortable, because NGOs sometimes think this is the role of the government to grow so big, but we've never shied away from that. And focus on women and girls, and really making women the center of all of the development models that we run. And going forward, Laurie, I'd say it's these things that would keep us relevant and in the years to come. So if you look at the last 50 years, we've had a huge impact on Bangladesh's numbers, right? So our maternal child mortality now are among the lowest in the developed world. Not comparable to the developed world, but if you compare us to the developing world, Bangladesh has made some of the best gains in social indicators, maternal mortality, infant mortality. If you look at the number of children in schools in Bangladesh now, it's one of the highest. If you look at gender parity in primary and secondary education, Bangladesh has achieved that well before the MDG targets, because those were part of the MDG targets. Mm-hmm. You look at if you look at ultra poverty and extreme poverty, which is one of the 2030 goals, number one goal of the SDG goals, Bangladesh has done some of the best gains in reduction of extreme poverty and ultra poverty, over the last 20 years of any country in the developing world. Of course, we've now taken a hit because of COVID. That's been a global hit. Extreme poverty rates are now going up again. Mm-hmm. But until then, it was going down sustainably for a long time. If you look at many other indicators, Bangladesh is doing very well. I wouldn't say it's all because of BRAC, but BRAC has made a significant contribution to a lot of those. And Bangladesh will achieve middle income status in the next few years. It will become $1 trillion economy in the next 10 years. I mean, it's sometimes, I say these words, I can't believe them myself, right? Because this was historically one of the poorest countries in the world. And the kind of social and economic gains this country has made in the last 50 years is quite incredible. And it's been a thing of amazing pride and honor for us to be a part of that journey of this country. And really looking at how do we take some of that learning and some of those experience outside. A few things I'll highlight. One, our founder used to say, the needs of society will evolve and change over time. And one of the things you all need to do is continue to stay relevant. Mm-hmm. Don't get complacent. Don't think we've already figured it out. We've cracked these problems, because they're going to change over time. New problems will emerge. Climate is one of them. Conflict. Obviously, COVID last couple of years. So continuously reinvent yourself as an organization. Continue to learn from the communities with which you work. Continue to innovate solutions that are practical, scalable, and don't afraid to continue to grow even bigger and take things to scale. Don't stop, right? Even in his last days,
Right.
I remember every opportunity he got, because he was very worried that once he exits the stage, we would all try to consolidate things, right? And say, okay, now we've grown big, the visionary is gone, and now we've got to consolidate. And he used to say, do not consolidate, keep growing bigger, because the needs of society are growing, and organizations like BRAC have to remain relevant to those needs. So let me stop there. I'll come back.
That's fantastic. Oh, Shamron, thank you so much. What a great way to get us started. And I love that. Don't stop. I think that's actually the kind of the subtext of BRAC over the 50 years. And as you say, inviting the future of what we need to attend to. But your reminder of that BRAC's history is really rooted in the history of Bangladesh. That was a really helpful reminder. And the what and the how, what BRAC has done, but also how it's done it. So thank you. We're going to pursue some of those topics a little bit more in conversation. But Salim, let me turn to you and invite you from your perspective as CEO of the bank. As you look back and look forward, what stands out to you as some of the best contributions or the most significant contributions of BRAC, looking back, and the relevance of BRAC going forward?
Thanks, Laurie. BRAC's reach in Bangladesh is enormous. It's vast. I'm not going to talk about the international piece. I don't think there are many people in this country of 170 million who can say that they haven't been touched or impacted in some way by BRAC over the last 3 or 4 or 5 decades. And the impact of BRAC has been very significant, not only in health or education or poverty alleviation or development activities, but to me, the way that BRAC has helped influence our people to change their mindset and believe in themselves, that to me is a very major impact, that positive impact that BRAC has had in Bangladesh on our people. The change from being a basket case, as Henry Kissinger called us, and learning to not to be dependent on aid all the time, learning to be self-sufficient, that to me is quite extraordinary. It's a different perspective, but to me, I feel that BRAC has helped our people stand up for themselves. It's helped empower our people. To me, that is very, very positive, and it's an intangible. One can't really measure that, but to me, that is something that I think we should all focus on as well. With BRAC, and you mentioned the model and whether the approach is relevant for anybody else. BRAC is not just very large. Actually, it's the largest NGO in the world with, I think, 90,000 plus employees. But it's very, very fast growing, as Shamron mentioned, very focused on growth. And it's very business-like. I think that's very, very, very important. I found that out myself. At BRAC, they use this business-like approach, almost sometimes I call it a human-centric design approach, an HCD approach in tackling social issues and inequality and poverty alleviation, etc., etc. And they are, because of that very structured, systematic approach, they're able to use their funds to ensure that their development actions all have very measurable impacts. I find that quite extraordinary compared to other NGOs. And somehow BRAC seems to understand that there are factors beyond basic economics that account for why people are poor. And they are able to find out those reasons and work on them. To me, that is very relevant for anybody, anywhere, any institution. Let me leave it at that and let you move to Mary.
Thanks, Salim. That's great. And I so appreciate your focusing on the intangible, because you're right. Oftentimes with any organization, and certainly an organization like BRAC, we look at the products and the services and the things that we can see and count. But this notion of empowerment, I think, is so fundamental to what BRAC is about and what BRAC has achieved. Thank you for identifying that. And also really appreciate, and you use the same words with Shamron about the business-like aspects. And I think the observation, what you're both highlighting, is that business-like approach is across all of the entities within the BRAC family. It's a common thread, which I would at least posit, I think, helps the various entities connect with each other, because they are operating with a similar set of expectations and challenges for how they want to deliver and their performance, even if their tool or their intervention is distinct. That's just terrific. Mary, I'm going to turn to you, and you, of course, know BRAC as a friend and an ally over many decades, both in Bangladesh and globally. What stands out to you as you look back and look forward?
So what I'm just going to add to the litany of superlatives, tried to think of some additional ones, of which there are many. So on my list is that it has been sustainable for 50 years. And that means that, one, it's been able to build up enough net worth so it has the ability to withstand short-term problems. But it more importantly probably means that it can pilot new ideas with its own funds without needing to get a donor or some outside person to agree to it. In one recent year, 81% of its annual revenues came from earned income, 81%, which means that it can start each year knowing that it does not have to hustle for grants, either in the current year or the just prior year. The saying of Abed that I remember is, small is beautiful, but big is necessary. So we've all talked about this ability to operate at scale. And I would just remind the audience of the wonderful story about oral rehydration therapy that was in the film. A 10-year project, it reached 80% of the women household managers in the country. So another thing I would point out to the GABV members is that it started very early with credit, with microcredit. But it didn't just do microcredit from the very get-go. It realized that its customers also needed to have connections to markets in order to be able to earn income, and it needed to have access to education and training, so knowledge about how to proceed and to grow. I cannot conceive of a better managed organization or company than BRAC. Salim's had 90,000 employees. Other people have pointed to dozens of social enterprises and investments, national scale, 11 countries, meticulously done, and with excellent evaluation systems, so that there are parts of BRAC that are learning hubs. And there are articles which essentially have BRAC employees commenting on, oh, we made a terrible mistake when we started this venture. We shut it down quickly. So quick to recognize an error and always learning. And then finally, for the organization, for the people in the audience, please remember that the other day, Salim told us that half of their loan portfolio is in loans to small and medium businesses. And most of the bankers in the audience know that most banks quickly move up market as quickly as possible because they really don't want to screw around with small businesses that don't have every perfect audited statement and know precisely what they can afford to borrow. So this focus on small businesses is needed in every country in the world. And so that really is part two of your questions, Laurie. It's sort of, how is this going to be relevant going forward? Not only is poverty growing globally, but the world is going to continue to need access to both banking resources and to higher risk sources of capital, other supports for borrowers like the many social enterprises and investments that BRAC supports. And GABV is an international network that intends to lead the way to prove that banks can be interested not only in financial returns, but also in social and environmental returns. So with BRAC as a founder and active participant, it should be able to continue to recruit interest from others around the world who see these issues as complex as they are. I was trying to think about whether there's ever been a conversation at GABV about whether or not other banks in the network also are using multifaceted organizational structures in order to achieve their purposes. And I was able to think of, in my own country, that City First Broadway, Southern, and Beneficial State Bank all have non-bank affiliates that are doing pieces of the work. But maybe it's time for the network to have a discussion about how that works, what's needed, what's been learned by various members elsewhere in the world. In ShoreBank's experience, my own company, a bank in Chicago, we did always want to have some non-bank enterprises that would be able to do things that a regulated bank cannot do. But I was thinking that in our experience, since we're so far less talented than BRAC, that we only found one thing that really worked, and that was higher risk lending programs, which could take on the piece of the transaction that a bank could not finance, but they would do it just as higher risk debt. And that's a growing industry in the US. Maybe it's a growing industry everywhere. In the US, there are 1,200 of these non-bank loan funds that provide debt to either housing or small business. So that would be my thoughts for the moment.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary. Fantastic. And I really appreciate your reminder of the power of the financial strength. And especially for this audience, as we talk about that, I mean, it's just such a good reminder. This notion of willingness to fail and learn and adapt and move on, I think is just as a culture, as an operational culture, a great point. And your reminder of just the relevance of what we need to solve for today. What BRAC has been doing and is doing is even more relevant, I might posit, globally, given the examples that you shared. And your last point is exactly where I want to go. Shamron, back to you. This notion of banks and non-banks in some kind of partnership. And BRAC does it a certain way, but there are lots of ways to be in partnership and strategic alliance, synergistic delivery of products and services. So based on your experience and your vantage point, Shamron, running BRAC International and being a part of the GABV community for as long as you have been, what are some of the thoughts you might share with the audience of ways that banks can think about the opportunity set of working with non-bank organizations in their own communities?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Laurie. So, yeah, I mean, first of all, from BRAC's perspective, we look at how we can have impact at scale through our holistic model, and financing is a huge part of that, right? So whether we do it through our microfinance arm, or through the bank, or through the non-banking financial services that the other non-banking financial services that we've invested in, or our life insurance company, I mean, we have a strong belief that for development, you need both the economic and the social to go hand in hand. That's really important. You can't just focus on economic development and neglect the social elements of what keeps people entrenched in poverty. And neither can you work on the social elements of poverty and injustice and deprivation without working on the economic and financial elements of that. So the two things really need to go hand in hand. Now, BRAC's obviously done it. BRAC, the mothership BRAC is an NGO, but BRAC has done microfinance. BRAC has invested in a bank and other financial services. But from, when I think of my BRAC International experience, where we've invested in microfinance entities in some of these countries, and we also run NGO activities in some of these, so basically development activities in some of these countries. I really do think about this question a lot. How do we bring these closer together? So, so Laurie, about our bank in Uganda. So we run a tier 2 microfinance bank in Uganda. We also have one of the largest NGOs in Uganda, where we do development programs in health and education and empowerment of adolescents and youth and skills, early childhood development. And one of the things we've been trying to work a lot on is, how do we ensure that the bank providing the finances, whether it's savings or credit or other types of financial services, and the NGO that provides development services can really work together to enhance impact and multiply impact. And one of the really exciting things that we have now is we have a large grant from the MasterCard Foundation to really scale this program that will impact the lives of over a million adolescent girls and young women across Africa. And there, we've really built this holistic model where we build on top of our microfinance work and build a whole suite of services that will be provided by the NGO, not the MFI, because again, the MFI, like most of our banks in the GABB network, are highly regulated entities and cannot do a lot other than your core business, and neither should you. But if that is your mission and you want to do it, there are many ways to do it, and one of the ways we've been doing it is through setting up other institutions. So in our case, non-governmental organizations or civil society organizations that take care of the social elements, and then the banks in our network, the microfinance banks in our network that take care of the economic and financial element, and bringing those two things together to really enhance and multiply impact on the communities that we serve. So that's just a BRAC example. Obviously, there are many ways to do this. I know there are many banks in the network, as Mary mentioned as well, that have entities outside of the core bank. The issue, of course, with banks is they are highly regulated.
Right.
So, for me, I think it's better that the banks stay close to their core business and get really good at that, whatever that is. For BRAC Bank, that's obviously small and medium enterprises. For other banks, it's other business lines. And work with partners, whether they're your own or even outside partners, to see where we can add even greater value to society.
Fantastic. Shamran, thank you for that, because what I'm hearing your message is it's and not or, particularly if you care about ultimately that the individuals, the households, the communities that you're endeavoring to serve, but recognizing also that delineation from an operating entity point of view. There are delineations, some driven by regulation, some driven by other just areas of expertise that come with operational delineation. But it's that multiplier effect if you do find ways to put these things together, the pieces together. So Salim, I want to turn to you and ask you, from your point of view as the CEO of the bank in the BRAC family, what's the benefit to you of being part of the BRAC family as an operating, regulated, I should say, publicly listed financial institution in Bangladesh? Can you speak to that?
Sure. BRAC actually owns approximately 46% of BRAC Bank, which, as you said, is a publicly listed company. It's about 20 years, a little over 20 years old now. And it is also, it has the single largest market capitalization of any bank in the country. Although there are about 6 or 7 banks which are much larger than us. The bank actually, it derives its DNA, its purpose, its very strong development focus from its main sponsors, BRAC. And of course, BRAC has been running the board since inception back in 2001. And today, the bank's purpose is articulated as being there to help our customers prosper, which is, I think you'll find, is also aligned very much to GABB and BRAC's own purposes as well. If you think about it, there's absolutely no question that we would not have had this kind of focus on development without the BRAC ownership. There's no doubt about that. We would have been, like every other bank in this country, we would have been a profit-focused only kind of entity. And not just that aspect, but I honestly think even the emphasis we have in terms of corporate governance and compliance and transparency, basic hygiene factors for any institution, even these have been significantly enhanced by the BRAC ownership. So that's why that ownership is very, very important in the way it's shaped this organization over the last 20 years. And I refer to BRAC Bank here. One only has to, in the Bangladesh perspective, Laurie, compare BRAC Bank with other banks in the system to see how we are different. And I really don't think that would have been the case without the BRAC Association. You know, as far as partnerships, you mentioned that earlier. That too is something that we have tried translating in our own way in our sector in terms of businesses. The realization that we can't do everything we want to do by ourselves. We call it an open partnership strategy. In other words, we will partner a hospital, an educational institution, another MFI. We actually lend more than $400 million to other microfinance institutions in the country as well, outside of BRAC. But this strategy of learning to partner different institutions, other banks, other non-banking financial institutions, fintechs, etc., Bikash, for example, we partner them in many ways as well. We partner many parts of BRAC as well, and all this lends to us improving and growing our business, our clientele, being economically much more relevant. So instead of remaining insular, as unfortunately most banks in this country are, we've learned from BRAC to embrace this idea of partnership with many different kinds of entities. That has become, particularly since, say, 2018, a very core strategy for BRAC Bank, a kind of an open business strategy that we follow. And of course, we only partner the right kinds of partners who we feel will add value to whatever we want to do and who have similar kinds of beliefs.
Fantastic. Now, Salim, thank you for that. So it's both how it brings additional focus, but also stretches the bank. And I love your expression of the partnership, not just with other members of the BRAC family, but beyond. And I think, Mary, picking up from your suggestion, maybe this is a conversation topic that we can continue to explore around the GABV table, because what we're solving for in communities are more similar than different, but how we do that, recognizing some of the roles and the distinctive contributions that institutions can make is an important part of the conversation. So that's terrific. We're getting a few audience questions here, and I also want to get to a leadership question. So I'm actually going to take two from the audience right now. They're quite interesting. So Adriana is asking, given the interdependent needs and problems, how does BRAC narrow down and prioritize the interventions over time? So, I mean, we've talked about this kind of vast reach of interventions. So maybe, Shamron, I might ask you first, and then Salim with the bank. How do you come up with your prioritizations in executing on what you're seeing as the needs in society? From Adriana.
Yeah, maybe I'll answer that in two ways, Laurie. One, obviously, to say that you always have to prioritize at a level, and obviously for BRAC, it's always based on where are the needs the greatest and where can we play the biggest role. So obviously we wouldn't get into things that we don't think we can have a huge value and we can't scale. And obviously, that's many things, but where we think we have a role to play and we can go in and add value to society, we would. But this other way I would answer this question is our founder would have really probably reacted to that question by saying, why do you need to narrow down? I mean, this idea, there's an idea, when you go to strategy sessions and you start with, we can't be good at everything. We've got to really learn to be good at a few things and really decide what not to do and what to do. And he would say, look, if we can be good at 2 things, we can be good at 5 things. So again, don't be limited by your ambition, or the lack of it. Learn to do things well, and people can do many things well. It doesn't have to be 1 or 2 things. So really, from BRAC's perspective, and obviously we don't all feel that way, but he felt very strongly that way, and he drove us in many different directions. And he would say, we're going to go fast, we're going to fail fast. Things we can't figure out how to crack, and things we'll get out of, but we're going to try. Yeah. And we're not going to limit ourselves to just 1 or 2 things and become a niche player in the market. We're not just going to be the best provider of primary education. We're not just going to become the best provider of healthcare at the primary level. We're not going to just become the best microfinance institution in the world. We're going to be all of that and more. And it's that kind of ambition and courage that made us what we are, and led to the impact that I think we've been able to have, especially in this country, but increasingly now globally as well.
That's fantastic, and I do remember hearing your founder say that several times to me as well. Don't narrow prematurely. But I also remember him saying, make sure that what we're doing is needed. So listen hard to the community. So if there was a prioritization, it came from what's needed in the community. Listen to that, and then your reminder of learn, fail, innovate, respond, and keep that cycle going. But making sure always that we're being responsive to what the community needs. But I think that's fantastic, Shamron. I'm actually, because we're getting a number of questions, which is great. Manuel is asking, Saleem, I'm going to direct this to you. How relevant is the digital platform in the bank to thinking about not only your financial performance, obviously, but social and environmental impact as well? I mean, Bcash is a mobile money platform, so technology, of course, is very powerful within the BRAC Bank family. But as you think about your impact, can you speak to the relevance of your digital approach, digital platform?
Absolutely. It is very, very relevant. It is, we began a digital transformation of BRAC Bank. We started planning in 2018, Laurie, and started rolling out these, working on the projects from 2019 and rolling out a number of them from 2020, 21 onwards. What this new platform, and it's only, I think we've covered maybe 20% of it really, but it allows, it gives us reach. We are able to access customers and customer segments in geographies across the country in a very efficient and very effective manner. So it's improving reach, improving customer experience, being able to offer services at a price, at a cost that is commercially viable to us and is acceptable to that particular client segment as well. That is something we were not able to do in a bricks and mortar analog paper-based environment back in 2016, 17, maybe 18 also. We can do much more and make it relevant, I hark back to something Sir Abid said to me a long time ago, 2015. He said, development must be commercially viable if it's to be sustainable. What this digital transformation has done is it's made us now fit for real growth. We've just had a strategy refresh a few months ago, and we've decided to really step up our business growth and double our market share over the next 4 or 5 years. And the only reason we can now think of doing that is because we have a different technology platform from what we had earlier. We are able to do much more, much faster, much cheaper, and really reach customers, offer them services digitally through a mobile, actually, in most cases, through the internet, through laptops and computers in a manner that we were not able to do earlier. So no doubt about it, that digital platform, the digital transformation of the banking sector is absolutely essential if we are to be able to bank the millions of people in Bangladesh who are still unbanked.
Right. Fantastic, Saleem. What I like about your answer is you also highlight the external, of course, the reach power of digitization, but also internally, how it enhances the efficiencies of the bank and looking at your own impact and your results. So really terrific. Mary, I want to turn to you, and I want to, in our final minutes, I want to talk a little bit about human capital and leadership. And we know, the BRAC model relies on a significant human capital. We've heard the numbers in conversation, but of course, every organization also draws from its leader. And you knew Abid Pai for many, many years. And can you share your thoughts about the leadership legacy of BRAC's founder as in the context really of this conversation as we look ahead as well?
So, Laurie, I have 2 thoughts about that, because I agree with you that in order for other banks or new banks to do what BRAC is trying to do, that more than anything, it will require very ambitious and capable leaders. So we just have to accept the fact that Abid was an extraordinary manager and leader. in the answers that Shamron just gave about why not, don't prioritize, just do it. That's, and the organization then did it. That is just strong, trusted leadership. And Abed was, in my experience, was always so clear that this was only about addressing poverty and was only doing it at scale. So he's very, very clear prioritization overall. But then the second thought I was having is that there's no question but that the talent is there around the world to join the GABV banks and to work on businesses that have social and environmental purposes as well as financial purposes. If anything, the banks could empty out with the amount of talent that would like to escape a conventional bank and work for a broader purpose, so that nobody has to worry about whether the talent is there to manage this activity. And I think you're right to just point out that it will take very ambitious leadership and maybe also more complicated governance, a stronger requirement on boards to keep up not only with digital platforms and digital opportunities and risks, but also to just keep up with complex management structures. So that's another community of practice around GABV that could focus on this issue, with the board of directors group. But I think of those responses, the most important thing is, talent is not the problem. It wants to do this kind of work.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Mary. Thank you for the reminder of that. And I personally agree with you completely. And I also appreciate your use of the word ambition. And one thing I shared with you, Mary, in anticipation of this conversation, and Abed Pai, I just think exemplified this, was fierce ambition, but for what? For the results, focused on the serving the needs of people. And yet he retained an extraordinary humility as a human being. So a fiercely ambitious leader with extraordinary humility is just, something that is incredibly special. And those of us who had the privilege of working alongside him were just so influenced by that and inspired by that. So thank you for highlighting it. We're getting to our time. I'm going to ask you all to do a final wrap up. But as you do, Salim, you have an extra question. It came in from Alexander asking whether BRAC Bank would be able to provide a banking platform for other banks. So if you could speak to that and then give just a closing reflection as you look ahead to the challenges that are confronting us, people and planet. What do you pull from the BRAC model that you think or that you hope will continue to deliver for the decades ahead? So if you could answer the technology question first and then give your closing comment, and then I'll go to Mary and Shamron.
Well, as far as the technology model is concerned, it's not internal. There are multiple models, and I'm happy to have a broader discussion, a more technical discussion offline. So I forget who asked the question. If he could send me an email, I'd be happy to actually discuss that with him. I don't think this is the right forum for us to get into those technicalities. But it's not just the technology platform itself, it's the strategy behind it, the purpose behind it. Why do you want it? What do you want to do with it? That is, I think, even more important. So I'll leave it at there.
That's
Laurie.
a good reminder. And then your closing comment about BRAC's model as we look to the decades of the future, Salim, what you hope will be the sustaining aspects of BRAC's model going forward.
I'm not a development specialist in any way. I'm a commercial banker, Laurie. But to me, this model is self-generating. It's timeless. Equipping people with the capabilities to participate in economic activities, to helping them to believe in themselves and helping them to lift themselves out of poverty or difficulties that they are in. This has to be relevant everywhere. And it has to be relevant not only in lower income groups, but I think in all kinds of, if I may use the word, client segments. To me, that's very important. You know, in 2018, when we were working on the BRAC Bank digital transformation, I learned a couple of concepts. One was human-centric design. They didn't call it human-centric design 50 years ago, but Sir Abed was practicing that in the 70s. Mm-hmm. The other thing I learned about from one of these very expensive consultants was learn to fail fast. And you heard how Mary and Shamron spoke about that. Right. BRAC was doing that a long, long time ago. So those concepts are very relevant even today and will be for many, many years going forward. I also have to say that, you know, the BRAC mission, which is to sort of, you know, encourage economic participation, by empowering people, it's perfectly aligned to the GABV objectives of our triple bottom line and the long-term resiliency, the real economy, transparency, impacting culture. It fits perfectly, and which is why I think BRAC Bank and the GABV are a perfect fit too.
That's great.
I think the idea of understanding people, empowering them, engaging them in productive livelihoods, that is going to be globally relevant forever.
So well said, Salim. That is incredibly well said, and I think it really drives home for all of us, wherever we're sitting, that relevance factor, meeting people's needs through both the products and services, but also that notion of empowerment is a universal, is a common thread. It's not unique to Bangladesh. It applies everywhere. So that was beautifully said. Thank you for that, Salim. Mary, I'm going to turn to you with your final thought about BRAC's model in the future decades.
So I think the most important takeaway is that from the very beginning, BRAC was going to be sustainable and not dependent upon government and philanthropy, period. And then my second comment is that I encourage people to read the two articles the two references that you gave at the beginning, the Harvard Business Review article about BRAC at 20 and a book by Ian Smiley called Freedom from Want. It's well worth your time.
That's great. Thank you, Mary. And I loved your comment about what sustainability allows you to do is not only be resilient, which you highlighted, but also to innovate without dependence on others. And then you're pursuing that innovation in a way that Shamron was talking about, meeting people's needs. And so Shamron, I'm going to give the final word to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Laurie. I know we're running out of time, so I'll try to be quick. Obviously, again, I think I've said it before. Mary said it, Salim said it. We're going. One of the things that we always try to do is continue to learn. Always be a learning organization. Learn from the people you work with. Stay close to the communities, and try to stay relevant. So I'll give you a quick example. Over the last 50 years, BRAC has done a huge amount of work in education, and most of the work was in access. So children weren't going to school, so we built thousands and thousands of schools, and we educated millions of children. There was a time in the late 90s, mid to late 90s and early 2000s, where at any given time, over 1 million children were enrolled in BRAC schools. BRAC has educated more than 17 million children, and obviously most of them girls. So focus on girls' education. We've done it in Bangladesh, we've done it in Afghanistan. We've done it in Pakistan, in the Philippines, in Uganda, in Tanzania, in Liberia, in South Sudan. But now, in a country like Bangladesh, access is no longer the main issue. So now we're moving to quality. How do we ensure children have quality education and they get a 21st century global education that makes them ready for the future? So again, that's the thing about relevance. You can't keep doing what you were doing 10 years, 15 years, 20 years ago. You've got to keep learning about the changing dynamics of society, the changing aspirations of the people you work with, and provide services that are relevant to them. And that's the only way that we will hopefully survive at least another 50 years, if not more. But again, to all of you on our 50th anniversary, it was great to do this session. And we'll be celebrating big time over the next couple of weeks, and hope you all join us in our celebrations. Thank you.
Fantastic. Shamron, that was a fantastic way to end. Thank you. And in every conversation with BRAC and about BRAC, I'm always learning. And that was just a perfect demonstration of that from all three of you, and then the closing story. So Thank you all. Thank you to the audience for your terrific questions. And as Salim said, people are available to interact outside of our session together. But we're at time. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Tom with deep appreciation to Mary, to Salim, and to Shamron.
Actually, I just realized I'd said something beautiful and it was all on mute. Again, rarely have we seen such a remarkable, comprehensive story of a bank and of a foundation. One of the things that we want to do now is we want to transition to the premium stage. That's the knee-to-knee, where we're going to hear from 3 of our CEOs on sustaining values during a leadership transition. And we look forward to seeing our CEOs, our governing board members, and our invited guests to that session. We'll see you soon, and thank you ever so much for the team that put this together.